On the line with us is Jamal Abdi, the president of the National Iranian American Council, NIAC. NIACouncil.org is the website, and Jamal's Twitter handle is jabdi, A-B-D-I, or at NIA Council or at NIA Action. Jamal, welcome back to the program. Iran just had an election, and the guy that they selected to run the country or administer the country, I guess would probably be a better way of saying it, is sometimes referred to as the Butcher of Tehran. Tell us about the election, who this fellow is, and what it means to Americans in particular.
The winner of this election was Ebrahim Raisi, and he was hand-selected by the Supreme Leader. And, you know, the elections in Iran, they're never free or fair. They're always consequential. And I think this election in particular was, some people are calling it a turning point, but it was the most sort of highly stage-crafted event in the Islamic Republic's history. And as a result, the way that these elections work is there's a guardian council. They vet candidates on if they are eligible to run based on do they support the system? Are they, pious enough? And, usually there's games that are played here, and, you have kind of shocking disqualifications of the past. Like you had Rafsanjani, who was kind of a father of the Islamic Republic, who was disqualified in the 2009 elections. And a lot of people at that point said, this is wild. They're cracking down even more than they normally do.
Right.
And sorry, not 2009, 2013. This year they disqualified, the former one of the Larijani brothers, who is also, part of the system and widely viewed as being the most likely next president. But they had aligned with the reformists, and so Larijani got disqualified. You had others who were disqualified, and Ahmadinejad, for instance, was disqualified, the former president. Mm-hmm. So it was really viewed as the field was completely narrowed, and all the potential obstacles for Raisi to win were taken off of the field. And there was one kind of token, moderate reformist, not somebody super well known, but in past elections, the person that squeaks through, who is, reform-minded, challenging the system, they have tended to be very successful. And you go back successive elections in Iran where that has been the winning candidate.
That was Rouhani, wasn't it?
Seldom the Supreme Leader's candidate. That was what Rouhani was. Rouhani elected, in 2013, and it was, not to get too deep into kind of the psychology here, but this election had the lowest turnout in Iranian or the Islamic Republic's history. So typically these elections are widely participated in, between 65 and 75%.
Essentially just boycotting the election because there wasn't a Rouhani-type reformist candidate on the ticket that they believed in?
The second largest share of the votes went to blank and spoiled ballots.
Wow.
So there was certainly an act of protest here. There's also a sense of, I think, apathy, disillusionment. When Rouhani was elected in 2013, it was a shock as well. Nobody had expected that this figure was going to be able to defeat the Supreme Leader's chosen candidate. And it was interesting because in 2009, there were disputed elections, and a lot of people gave up on the idea of challenging the Islamic Republic at the ballot box and the ability to have an impact on, your livelihood through the electoral process.
Right.
But lo and behold, in 2013, people showed up and they kind of defied expectations and showed up in droves and managed to get Rouhani in. And he had been promising negotiations with the West and easing pressures at home, ending some of the human rights abuses and things like that. And so now we're in a similar scenario where, similar to past elections, 2005 in Iran, similar situation, where there's apathy and disillusionment as well as protest keeping people from the ballot box. But I think that anybody who's saying, well, this is a turning point and there's no way that Iranians are going to be able to impact or change the system through organizing, through going through the electoral process, I think it's a little bit early to say that. I think that the next election is going to be very interesting. And I think for this election, it's really a question of why did the Supreme Leader or, the powers that be, why did they decide that the legitimacy of the Islamic Republic, which they often cite these voter totals, the mass participation as a key source of legitimacy, and instead they decided we actually don't need people to turn out. We don't need that popular legitimacy. Instead, we're going to put our guy in charge to take a tough line with the West. And we know that there's going to be negotiations. So let's send the biggest hardliner to the table with the U.S. because we sent the nice guy the last time, and look what Donald Trump did to us.
Wow, that's fascinating. I would think that even the hardliners in Iran and even the new president would be interested in getting the sanctions lifted. Their economy has suffered terribly under these sanctions, and putting the country back together. I mean, it would help their popularity if nothing else. How do you think this is going to play out in these revisiting these negotiations with, what is it, the 5-country coalition? Yeah,
well, it's the P4+1, and then the U.S. is a participant, but they're not in the Iran deal, so they're not actually formal participants. But look, I think the Supreme Leader wants the deal. Raisi wants the deal. For them, though, the JCPOA represented this potential, I think, existential threat to the status quo. And I think for a lot of interests. I mean, I think for Netanyahu, I think for Republicans in the United States, everybody who opposed the deal, who was a player in it, had their reasons, but it was largely about keeping their grip on power, maintaining the status quo. For our side, there are people who just wanted to keep Iran in the penalty box forever and have this simmering nuclear crisis and kind of use that as an excuse to contain Iran and have a enlarged U.S. presence in the region. I think for the factions inside of Iran, the Revolutionary Guard, the hardliners, they were all very anti-JCPOA, very anti-Iran deal, not necessarily because of the economic benefits, but because by opening up the economy, by having this increased economic interdependence, and then seeing the lifting of sanctions, all of those sanctions are actually really beneficial tools for those who are benefiting from a sanctions economy and those who are benefiting from Iranians being isolated from the rest of the world, not able to organize and have a robust civil society. And so for them, they want to pocket the benefits economically.
So it's like an internal black market kind of thing that's controlled by the existing power structure. The sanctions actually help them get richer?
Help them get richer. Give them a monopoly on the economy. All the contracts in Iran are now IRGC run because they're if
that's the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, their military. Right.
Right. Yeah. If doing business is a violation of sanctions, if it's a criminal activity, well, then the criminals benefit. So the criminals are doing all the business.
Sure. So how do you, Jamal? We're going to hit a break here shortly. How do you think this is going to play out? What's your sense of where this is going and what it means to the West?
Well, I'm a little bit less hopeful about the nuclear talks. I mean, I think the prevailing view for folks kind of on our side of the debate is that we are likely going to get a JCPOA. We're going to get a return to the Iran deal, but that's going to be the ceiling. There aren't going to be follow-on talks. There aren't going to be opportunities for greater rapprochement, at least under this government. I'm worried. I think that the notion that we're going to get back into the nuclear deal, JCPOA depended a lot on the personalities around the table and the commitment and investment by the various players, whether it was John Kerry or Javad Zarif. With so many opportunities for misalignment, and I think it's going to be a much tougher gamut than some people are making it out to be. The saving grace may be that it's going to be the outgoing Rouhani government who manages to negotiate the U.S. returning to the deal, and then as soon as the deal gets up and running, they have to leave office, and then you get the Raisi.
When does that transition happen?
Reaping the benefits. That's at the beginning of August. I think it's the August 8th.
Okay. Fascinating stuff. Jamal Abdi, the president of the National Iranian American Council, NIAC, NIACouncil.org is the website, and Jamal's Twitter handle is JAbdi, ABDI, or NIA Council on Twitter.